All right. The light is kind of low, but we'll try it. And, you know, seeing me in dim light is probably a good thing. So we'll just, we'll go with it. And then hopefully the volume level, hopefully that'll work out too. There's a story that an author named Annie Dillard, if any of you are familiar with her, she talks about a story where a missionary goes to an Inuit village, an Eskimo village. And this missionary goes up to this village, this is quite some time ago, and is, proselytizing, evangelizing, sharing the faith, teaching these Inuit people about Christianity and the idea of heaven and hell and sin and so on and so forth. Missionary stuff, right? And so she talks about this hunter, Eskimo Inuit hunter, who was being witnessed to or proselytized to by this minister, by this priest, by the missionary. And so the missionary was telling him heaven, hell, salvation, sin, all these other things. And the Inuit hunter asked the missionary, he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "If I did not know about God or sin or any of these things and I died, would I still go to hell?" And the missionary said, "Well, no, if you didn't know, you wouldn't go to hell." And he said, "Well, why did you tell me that?" And it's a neat story, and it's kind of a funny story, but at the same time, yeah, you sort of get it. I mean, how many things it's like, I wish I didn't know that. Now I deal with sort of the burden of knowing this and having to deal with it. And how that relates to our normal, just day-to-day experiences. We have these experiences of just living our life, and then this other stuff comes up, our thoughts and ideas and judgments and sort of that critical narrator that lives within us who likes to give the color commentary in our heads as we go through our day. You know that one, who you'd like to have stop talking but never does. That one. How often we are affected by by this self-talk, by this voice within us. And this is kind of what we've been talking about in some ways through the Dhammapada. And this is, we're closing, it's fitting because this is our last class of this year, and it's fitting that we're talking about, it's fitting that we're doing it on the last class here. But we've been talking about how our desires and our reactions and our ideas about things really kind of make or break our experiences in many cases. And so how do we work with that? How do we work with it in a way that sets us free so that we can have a better experience, have a real experience? So that leads to, I want to share an experience that I had with you. I had this experience today, but it's perfect. And in this class, I've talked about this subject before, but it seems to be a really good one for talking about Dhamma teachings and meditation and so forth. And that is poop. This morning, I got up, I went downstairs. Darla left early to go to work. She left me a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "Ken, pretty please, will you go out and clean up the dog poop in the backyard?" That was her note. Reasonable request. We have 2 little dogs. And I knew she had been intending on doing that over the weekend and didn't get to it. So here was the interesting thing. Right away, I started to react to that note. kind of like, oh, gross. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go out in the cold. I start looking out the window. It looks cold, snowing a little bit. Go out there and get wet and clean up runny poop. Sounds not fun. Instantly, though, almost instantly, I became aware, hey, what's going on here? This is awareness. Last week, I was asked a question. It was kind of towards the end because we were talking about desire. But I was asked the question, so if you've been practicing this way, do you still desire things all the time, or do you eventually get rid of that? And my answer was, yeah, I still desire things all the time, but the place that desire has in my life is much different from what it once was. And in the handout that Darla gave everyone tonight, kind of the opening lines I think are appropriate, which are, it's not what is happening that is important. It is our relationship to what is happening that is important. Desire is only a problem when we convince ourselves that we must act on it. So back to this poop story. So right away, I'm aware of myself reacting negatively to the idea of going out and cleaning up the poop, right? Because I didn't want to. Pretty normal reaction. In the context, we call this a desire. It's like an aversion, but it's all kind of part of that package. Craving, clinging, aversion, desire, all of that. Sort of the same thing. So I found myself feeling this aversion, not wanting to do it, because I had other plans for what I was going to do in those next few moments. So, but right away, I became aware of that, and I thought, I'm going to work with this. What a perfect opportunity to work with this, because I just saw it come up. And this is such a, there's so many responses to the idea of cleaning up the dog poop. So I put on my coat and shoes, and I went outside, and the snow had melted, so there was a lot to clean up, and so it was a great day to do it. But becoming aware of the fact that it's our relationship to things that's important, much more important than the things that we're actually doing. It's our intention, like I said in that opening story. So I just became aware of how I was reacting to everything. This not wanting to clean up the poop, being grossed out by it, wanting to do other things. So I go outside, mindful of that aversion, not criticizing myself for it, but aware of it. And in that awareness, I was able to move to a more objective state. I also became aware of the other things that I was doing that were not cleaning up the poop. I was outside, there was little snowflakes drifting down, falling on the grass, which was a beautiful green. And there's like little weeds coming up, and the lawn looks really good for this time of year. I hear the sound of rain dripping off the roof into the gutters, into dribbling out the downspouts. I could hear the wet sound of tires of cars going by on the street. I could hear the sound of a train passing through the different intersections in town off in the distance, probably 2 miles away or something. I could look around and just see the neighborhood and the trees and all of these other things, and became aware that, the cleaning up the poop, the picking up the poop, if I was going to say, what am I doing right now? Normally it would be, well, I'm picking up the poop. But actually that was like just a very small percentage of the whole experience. And within that, the other parts of the experience were all these other things. And they were wonderful in their own way. They were all kind of neutral, but I was there. And so, yeah, I'm cleaning up the poop, but I'm also hearing the water dripping down into the gutters and the downspouts. I'm hearing, hearing the sounds of the neighborhood and having the experience of, the wind moving a little bit through the trees and all these things. The picking up poop was just such a tiny part of the experience. And so to be aware of that whole thing as it unfolded, I was able to really get in touch with, kind of the beauty of everything else. And so I finished it up, went inside, changed, washed up, went on with, the other things that I had planned for the day. But for the rest of the day, I thought about that experience several times very fondly, just thinking, wow, that was a great experience. I mean, picking up poop, that was great. I loved it. There was so much other stuff happening. Does this make sense? It's it's our relationship. And then I realized that, there's the actual experience, and then there's our reaction to the experience. And the two overlap each other so much that we think they're one and the same. But really, there is the experience, and then there's the reaction to the experience. And the reaction to the experience, even though it's very habitual, it's very ingrained and programmed, and something that we've probably done thousands of times in our lives, it's still volitional. It's still a choice. But the thing that gets us to a place where we can do something with that choice is the awareness part. That's the transformational aspect. So at any point in time, whether it's tension in the body, or that I'm distracted away from my breath, or that I have a little chore that I need to do that I don't want to do, any of those things are moments of enlightenment, So picking up poop, it was, honestly, a beautiful experience. So that kind of leads into what we're talking about tonight. One more thing I wanted to share with you, a little story, again with Annie Dillard. This is from her book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. The story about the Inuit and missionary comes from that book, and then also this other story. So I just want to share this with you because it's kind of makes sense with reference to how we see things, how we interpret things. She talks about, she was reading a book by Marius von Senden called Space and Sight. And when Western surgeons discovered how to perform safe cataract operations, they ranged across Europe and America, operating on dozens of men and women of all ages who had been blinded by cataracts since birth. Von Senden collected accounts of such cases, kind of his journal, the experiences of these people who were in many cases born blind, birth blind, had no sight experience at all, relied on other senses for their entire world of experience. So he captured some things in his journal and noted that many newly sighted people speak well of the world and teach us how dull is our own vision. To one patient, a human hand, unrecognized, is something bright, and then holes. Now this is, again, people who are seeing for the first time. The bandages come off, and it's like, this is their description of things. Shown a bunch of grapes, a boy calls out, "It's dark, blue and shiny. It isn't smooth, it has bumps and hollows." A little girl visits a garden. She is greatly astonished and can scarcely be persuaded to respond. She stands speechless in front of a tree, which she only names on taking hold of it. And then she refers to it as the tree with the lights on it. Just her experience of sunlight shining through the leaves of this tree, but she didn't recognize it as a tree until she actually went up and touched it. Because up until that moment, all of her experiences of tree were that. There was a young woman, 22, who was dazzled by the world's brightness and kept her eyes shut for 2 weeks. When at the end of that time she opened her eyes again, she did not recognize objects, but the more she now directed her gaze upon everything about her, the more it could be seen how an expression of gratification and astonishment overspread her features. She repeatedly exclaimed, "Oh God, how beautiful!" When her doctor took her bandages off and led her into the garden, the little girl, who was no longer blind, saw the tree with the lights in it. It was for this tree I searched, and this is Annie Dillard in her book. So from that story, she says, "It was for this tree I searched through the peach orchards of summer, in the forests of fall, and down winter and spring for years. Then one day I was walking along Tinker Creek, thinking of nothing at all, and I saw the tree with the lights in it. I saw the backyard cedar where the mourning doves roost, charged and transfigured, each cell buzzing with flame. I stood on the grass with the lights in it, grass that was wholly fire, utterly focused and utterly dreamed. It was less like seeing than like being for the first time. Knocked breathless by a powerful glance. The flood of fire abated, but I'm still spending the power. Gradually the lights went out in the cedar. The colors died. The cells unflamed and disappeared. I was still ringing. I had been my whole life a bell and never knew it until that moment. I was lifted and struck. I have since only rarely seen the tree with the lights on it. The vision comes and goes, mostly goes, but I live for it, for the moment when the mountains open and a new light roars in spate through the crack and the mountains slam." And when I read that, I just thought, there's her experience of the present moment, the tree with the lights on. How I think everyone has had that experience of seeing something and it's like seeing it for the first time. And you're not carrying your burden of all your stuff and your worries and your hang-ups for just one split second. You're able to see something so clearly that you're just dumbfounded. My God, how beautiful. And my experience is that this is really the practice of meditation and mindfulness, is to go back to that state where we come upon things like this and our natural reaction is, wow, this is wonderful, this is beautiful. The flip side of that we all know, which is we carry around our stuff. We carry around the I don't want to pick up the poop, which is 5% of the experience, 95% of the experience being the lights in the tree. You know what I mean? All those beautiful things, but we focus on the I'm picking up the poop. When in fact I was outside listening and hearing and feeling the cold and feeling the slush sticking to my shoes in that green grass, and so that was my experience. So when I came in, it was like, wow, I am looking forward to the next time I pick up poop.
I do. Don't you forget that part.
It's on tape. I can delete the file. No record. So anyway, that was a little bit of a spur trail we just went down, but I hope that makes sense to you. But that the way she writes, everything she writes sounds like poetry like that. She just incredible author, Annie Dillard. So one of the best ways to, and now I'm reading from the handout, one of the best ways to cultivate deep insight is by being with the things we don't like. It's easy to be with the things we like, but being with the things we don't like requires great patience, compassion, and wisdom. But those are the experiences that have the power to really transform us, because they give us access to a type of wisdom that we just don't normally have access to. So kind of that poop experience. Great metaphor for the rest of life, I think. Our problems are only a small part of this greater whole called life. Much of what makes up the problem is our thoughts. Allow the problem to be there, but along with it, allow the rest of life to be there too. Let thoughts about the problem get quieter, and as you do, allow more and more of life to pour in. We aren't denying the problems. We are just not giving them exclusive priority any longer. If anything, the thing we've been denying all along is the rest of life, as we focus exclusively on individual problems. And I'm not trying to diminish those or say they don't matter, or it's all in our heads or our imagination, or get over it, or any of that kind of thing. I'm just saying, if you really look at it, you say, yeah, this is a small part of my overall experience. Is there something I can learn? Is there something I can take from this to enrich my life? Observing things in this way, you see how normally we confuse the problem and how it feels to our resistance to the problem and what the resistance feels like. And as I said, the two usually overlap each other, so we mistake one for the other. But resistance to what we don't like or don't want, or the opposite of that is wanting what we don't have, often causes as much or more pain than the thing we don't want. That makes sense? Kind of a tongue twister, but yeah, I think it makes sense. Still experiencing desire, we use it as an opportunity to investigate. What do I want? Why do I want it? How will things be different if I get it? And then finally, who's the I that wants it? Coming upon that note in the kitchen, asking me to pick up the poop. Simple request, something I've done many times, but my reaction to it, ooh, I had something else in mind for the next 20 minutes or half hour or whatever that length of time was my reaction to it. Going out because I was willing to let go of my, I don't want to clean up the poop. I was able to have the experience. And that experience was wonderful. It was beautiful. You see the difference? When we discover the answers to these questions, paradoxically, we don't need to do anything with the answer. In other words, we don't act on the knowledge so much as the knowledge begins to transform our reactions to everything else. In this way, we transcend our problems altogether. And that's really important because we're so programmed. What do I do with this? What do I do with it? Well, in the example of me in the yard cleaning it up, there's nothing you can do with that. You can only live it. You can only be in it. You can only let that experience penetrate your being. So there's nothing, you don't have to take any specific action with it. But having the experience and having it mindfully, there's a real wisdom that comes from that. Something transcendent. And you'll see what I mean. And I'm sure you do understand, but you'll see as you work with it. There's a quote I'm aware of. I don't know who said it, but after spending a lifetime of trying to change the world, you'll find it is far easier to change your mind. And yeah, how true. So again, don't mistake this for if somebody's treating you badly, or you're being abused, or there's something that, really needs to change. I mean, there are real grievances in the world. There are real issues that we need to change. There are times when harm is really done to us, and we need to take healthy, proper action to change that. But just think about, how often does that really come up? Again, for most of us, not that often. It's a small part of life, but we spend so much of the rest of life, kind of pushing against it, being ready for whatever we might have to deal with. So this takes a certain amount of kind of fearlessness or courage. It's that releasing. Again, the same thing we do in meditation when we come across tension or we come across thoughts or ideas or distractions. We don't do anything with them. We release, and we just release into the experience. So when it comes to suffering, our reactions are everything. Our reactions keep the whole illusion in place. And the opposite of reaction is equanimity. Letting go of craving, clinging, and aversion, we can see the truth. The heaven of the present moment is there for us until we start to tell ourselves something different. Just like in that story about the Inuit hunter. Everything was fine. Why did you tell me? Now I'm stuck. Now I'm caught in that trap. Well, what are you telling yourself every day? A lot of that negative self-talk. We're just beating ourselves up, judging ourselves, judging others, and then judging ourselves because of that judgment. Setting impossible standards to achieve all of those things, when we can really go back to just, what's the experience? Anybody have any thoughts on that or want to discuss it at all? If not, I have a second meditation that I'd like to do. We have about 10 minutes left, and they give us a perfect amount of time to do this one. So it's the second practice. This one is different from the first one in that the first one that we did, that the 20-minute meditation, we move through our body. We're aware of the body and the sensations. We're aware of our breath. We're aware of what's coming up in the mind. That's kind of our core go-to meditation. The secondary meditation, this is one where there's some guided imagery and there's some visualization. And it's very helpful under certain circumstances. So I think this one might be helpful, especially going into the holidays here, or Christmas, I guess, where it tends to be a very stressful time for a lot of people because we're dealing with spending money in some cases, and more than we want to because of obligation. We're dealing with sometimes difficult people. This whole picking up the poop thing. Darla and I had an experience. We had a conversation about just encountering some of the difficult relatives, and knowing that you're going to have to spend some time. And there's always, we love our families and everything, but there's always somebody that you just sort of butt heads with, or that there's just some kind of friction. And we were talking about that this past weekend, and I really thought about that today with the experience of picking up the poop and realizing that, I've been thinking about these potential interactions and how they might go. All of it imaginary, none of it real. Preparing for conversations I'll probably never have, preparing for seeing people that I might not even see, but putting a whole lot of emotional energy into it, putting a whole lot of thought into it. And again, that went on by itself for a while until I became aware. Oh yeah, that's happening. So like I say, these desires and aversions, they still happen, but this practice is about cultivating the awareness so that you can, when you notice, that's when you can do something. Until then, it just kind of runs on a continuous loop. So it's the awareness. So today, in the experience of the picking up poop, I didn't do anything with that experience, but it kind of brought me to a place where I made peace with the idea of difficult relatives or conversations I might not want to have or any of that uncomfortable stuff, and I just let it go, and now I've released that. So this is one of the ways that wisdom just sort of casts a light on everything else we do and helps us with difficulties, even though they don't have anything to do with the initial experience. So, well, I'll leave this there, and let's go into this practice. So we'll just spend about 8 minutes, 10 minutes max. However you'd like to be, you can sit or lay down or whatever you'd like to do, and I'll guide us through this one. We'll do a little visualization. I'm going to start by sounding the bell. I invite you to follow that sound. As you're following the sound of the bell, you may have noticed that other sound that was harmonizing with it somewhere in the back of the room. Sound of the water cooler or something like that. And even in those moments, you'll become aware that, oh, I'm distracted by this other sound and I wanted to follow the sound of the bell. And this other sound kind of intrudes, and there's another observation, just our reaction to things as they come up. So let go of even that. No expectations. Let go of even that. And now as you're present in your body, we have been meditating previously, so everybody's kind of in a state of calm, samatha, which is calm abiding. You're in a state of peacefulness. You can sweep your awareness through your body and just release any tension you encounter. Be aware generally of the sensations in your body. And you can bring your awareness to your breath, to the base of your nose and the sensations of the breath. Just let your awareness be present there. And as you do that, I'll share some thoughts, some ideas with you, and just invite you to let my words speak for you. Let my words be your thoughts to the extent that you feel comfortable. Now imagine yourself in a different place, at a different time from this, walking through a beautiful park, a beautiful natural area, secluded, quiet, no buildings, no cars, no machines, nothing man-made, just the beauty of nature, you walking along on a path. Try and really feel yourself being there. Hear the sound that your feet make as you walk along the path. Look at the green grass and the trees around you. Feel the air as it blows through the trees and touches your skin. Hear the sound of insects and birds. Again, just really allow yourself to have the experience of being in this beautiful natural place. At some point along this path, you come upon a creek winding through. It's so beautiful you decide to sit next to it and rest for a period of time. So you sit down along the side of the creek and you just observe. You observe the water as it flows by. Let yourself be there. Let yourself hear the sound of the water washing gently over stones. Let yourself smell the water. That unmistakable aroma of water and organic life touching stones and plants. Look into the water of this little creek and notice the little aquatic plants growing on stones, moving with the current of the water. And as you observe, again, there's nothing you're supposed to do. Your only task is to observe. And at some point you notice a bubble on the surface of the creek. It's just a little upstream, a few feet upstream, and it moves down past you. You watch this bubble. You watch it as it passes down and out of sight. You see another little bubble. Same thing, the bubble comes into your awareness. You follow it along the surface of the water. It passes by, slowly fading out of sight. And then you have a thought about something, a worry or a concern. It comes up. It lasts for a moment. And then it fades away into nothingness. And you realize that your thoughts, and your concerns, and your worries are very much like these bubbles that form, pass by, and fade out of sight on the surface of the creek. All the while, the water continues to move. All the while, the creek passes by you. You're perfectly safe and dry, perfectly aware. And the next thought you have, you see it appear as a bubble on the surface of the creek. You watch as that bubble passes by and fades out of sight. A few moments later, another thought arises, a daydream, a fantasy. You see it arise as a bubble or a cluster of bubbles appearing out of nothingness, lasting for a very short time as it passes by, spiraling and twisting in the current, some of them bursting and disappearing as they move by, some vanishing out of sight. Your consciousness and your awareness is very much like this stream of water, an endless, effortless flow of awareness and of presence and of stability and of timelessness. And your thoughts and worries and stresses and concerns are temporary bubbles, momentary appearances, arising and passing, arising and passing. And you remain on the side of this beautiful creek observing, not getting wet, not having to jump in and chase bubbles or prevent them from coming, but just observing. Observing as the bubbles come and go, as thoughts come and go. Becoming aware of the presence that doesn't. That's who you are. Now I'd like to transition into our closing practice, which is to share the merits of our meditation, of our teaching, of our time here together tonight, to share those merits in the same way as that tradition I described, knowing that everything we give away, we get back in double. So with that intention in our hearts and minds, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings be surrounded by complete love and kindness. May all beings be truly happy and joyful. And may all beings experience real peace, real equanimity, and real freedom. And most importantly, may all of you in this room here tonight experience real joy, real happiness, and real freedom. Namaskar, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and sharing the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
We'll see you
2 weeks.